Welcome to the Operators Association podcast. This is our 14th episode. Last week, we introduced a new podcast series for our $20 subscribers, and then also our Flash tier subscribers, and also for the $5 Legacy tier members. You still have access to the full OA offering up until the end of the month. So those three groups got access to this bonus podcast. That was our 13th episode. So that one will be available every week. We're going to focus on the aspiring operators. We're going to focus on you all, the members of Operators Association. We're going to interview one of you a week. And the idea is not to have them come on and, challenge their, training and make sure they're on the right path or something, but rather I think that as much as, Zach and I are doing our best to impart our own experiences and keep them relatable, there is something a little bit almost like not relatable about, my experience to your own, because there's this chasm between, I want to be, for example, a SEAL and being a SEAL. And it's hard to really appreciate, I can appreciate the position that you all are in because I've been there, but you haven't been in my position. And so when I say something, and I remember this about my own experience when I joined, when I would hear an actual Navy SEAL talk about X, Y, and Z or offer advice, it was really useful. But there's also a part of me that's like, this guy, I don't know if he's lost touch or he forgets how complicated or hard this is. And so the idea behind the Aspiring Operator podcast is to bring on folks that are in your shoes, that are part of your community, which is this community on OA. And I think that I don't even necessarily think it's going to be like the answers they give as much as it's going to be for you all, the listeners, getting to hear your peer talk through their training and talk through what they're up to, how they came to this decision, and just getting to hear kind of comparing and contrasting your own experience with your peers. And so I think that that's a very valuable thing, but it is restricted to our uppermost tier because it is an additional podcast that we're putting out. And these are, time consuming to say the least. And so we want to make sure that, we have the support to do that. So if you're interested in getting this bonus podcast, you do need to be either a $20 subscriber, so you need to be the Aspiring Operator package, so $20. You need to have grabbed one of those Flash tiers, which we're no longer offering. Those are the $14 tiers we were offering last week. Or you're one of our original $5 subscribers that for this month only, September, you have full access to the site. Granted, that is going to be transitioned into a basic package, that those $5 members right now that have the full access at the end of this month, that is going to be a basic membership, and you'll lose access on October 1st to all the perks. So the 14 and the 20, you'll have it the rest of the year. 20, you're going to have full access until you stop being 20. So that's enough plugging of OA and things we're offering. Today's episode is the fifth part of the Bud's journey. So part 5. And just to do a recap, I guess if you've missed the other episodes, the first episode was, the focus was basically you finish Bud's prep and what happens from, okay, I've passed my exit PST, and what happens next between that point and actually starting first phase, because there actually is a chunk of time in there. There's transition from Chicago to San Diego. I talked a little bit about where you live, what the kind of living arrangements are, how to interact with the rollbacks and what that looks like. I talked about the kind of administrative stuff you had to do. And then I also talked about basic orientation, which is those kind of, it's almost like first phase, but like the light version. You do 3 weeks of BOW. That's the acronym that stands for basic orientation. BOW, it used to be called INDOC. So if you are somebody that watched the Bud's documentary, class 234, it's the INDOC phase that I'm referencing. That's basic orientation. So the first episode brought us from end of Bud's prep to the very first day of first phase. The second part, so part 2 of the Bud's journey, and these are all labeled on Patreon. So if you go to the link that has all the links to podcasts, and it even says in the header, like, does not include bonus podcast, it'll list out all the different links to the different podcasts, and the Buds Journey has titling, so you can definitely go in there. You can see Buds Journey Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, etc. So Part 1, that was Part 1. Part 2, we covered first phase. And I think that of all the episodes, I think that it was the least structured. The trend you see in all these episodes is that I try to do it as chronologically as I can, so that you're kind of getting not just a snapshot of the section of training, but kind of what happens in order. But first phase, it's really one kind of thing. It's pain and suffering, and it just kind of happens on repeat. For those first 3 weeks of first phase, it's pretty much the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, and it all kind of blends together, and it all kind of comes to a head when you get through that final third week, and you kind of punch your ticket for Hell Week, which is the fourth week. And so part 2 was just talking about those first 3 weeks of first phase. And for anybody that's a student of the Buds game, really the stuff you see on TV and all the kind of hype around how difficult Buds is, it's really on display in those first 3 weeks of Buds. It's the whole welcome to Buds thing. It's shock and awe. People are quitting left and right. It's really, really physically demanding. And so I talk as much as I can in detail about that part of training. Part 3 was about Hell Week. And I think that that is probably an episode you could watch or you could listen to as a standalone. It pretty much just focuses on the first part. The first 30 minutes is like the mindset shift that occurs from the time you're thinking about being a SEAL. You know, you're a civilian and you want to be a SEAL, to the person that you kind of become by the time you're sitting in that classroom getting ready for Hell Week to start. And to create a summary around that change, basically you go from putting Buds and becoming a SEAL totally on a pedestal. It just seems borderline unattainable, although like it's real and you've got a contract and you're going and all that, but it still feels like not real. By the time you've gotten to Hell Week, it's very real and it's normal. Buds is not this crazy thing anymore. You've been there a while. The kind of cool factor of, oh, look at me, I'm a Bud student, how crazy is that? That's gone. You're just like pissed and like you've developed this weird like cynical sense of humor like your whole class has. You're just like making fun of Buds constantly, and like you're just ready to just check the box. Buds, like Hell Week, you're ready to just check the Hell Week box at that point. Whereas when you were a civilian and you're thinking about Buds, you're looking at Hell Week like, man, that's going to be crazy. I wonder what it's going to be like. It's going to be so amazing if I get through it. When you get to Hell Week, you're like, dude, fuck Hell Week. I know I'm going to pass it. This is stupid. Buds is so dumb. I'm just ready to fucking do this and be done with it. So it's interesting. You develop a very hardened way of looking at Buds. So I talk about that, and then I get into Hell Week proper. Go through all of Hell Week as much as I can remember it. I do caveat the episode pretty aggressively by saying, look, like this is my memory, but I also didn't sleep for 5.5 days, minus a couple short naps, totaling 4 total hours of sleep. So my memory is probably not that great. So I did my best to be truthful and as accurate as I could be. And then part 4, our last episode, covered post Hell Week first phase, because first phase doesn't end when Hell Week does. First phase has another, call it, I think 3 weeks. Yeah, it's 3 weeks after Hell Week ends. And in those 3 weeks, you do a test called Life Saving, which I really struggled with. And had it not been for instructors really looking out for me when I failed Life Saving and should have gotten a performance role, the instructors gave me a medical role. Because I had SIPE. They discovered that after I failed the test, but it just goes to show that in Buds, if you put your head down and get the job done, and you have a strong reputation in your class, which just comes from being, a good person, really, more than anything. The instructors pick up on that, and I literally was pulled aside by my head instructor and was like, look, Alan, you're a good dude. I'm going to give you a med role, even though you failed Life Saving. And lo and behold, got to pool comp in the next part of training, and I failed it. I would have been dropped from training had it not been for having a medical role, because you can only have one med role and one performance role. At least when I went through, that was the rule. If you got a performance role and you failed something else later on, you couldn't get rolled again. You were just dropped. So Anyways, but life saving, it's referred to kind of colloquially as the puking evolution. It's a total kick in the face, but it's very doable. And I talked about that. And then I talked about second phase, but second phase is really split in two. You have the first half, which is basically the build up and then also going through pool week, which has the famous pool comp test. And it also, you do the 5-minute tread as well. And that's actually what we were able to get through on episode 4. So we got through post-hell week first phase, wrapped up that, including life saving. Then we got into second phase, and we talked about pool week, which is really actually easy and kind of fun, except for 2 really specific things. You do pool comp and you do the 5-minute tread. And if you are fishing for information about pool comp, because there isn't much online about it, I go into pretty specific detail about what actually happens in pool comp, down to like procedures, which I do basically remember them. And then I also talk a little bit about what makes the 5-minute tread so hard. And it's actually not the tread. It's the travel, the front travel you have to do when you finish the tread. So for this episode, we are going to get into post pool comp, because that's where we ended. We ended with pool comp being done. And we're going to get into what happens in second phase after you finish pool comp. And then we may be able to actually get into third phase, and third phase as well is segmented really into 2 sections. There's the section of third phase that you do in San Diego, like in Coronado at the Buds Command, and then there's the section of third phase that you do out on San Clemente Island, which is I know for a fact that needs to be its own episode, because that is a fucking shit show. And deserves a full episode. So by my account, we really have 2 parts left. We have today's episode, and then we have one more, which will be the wrap up to third phase, and that will be that. So without further ado, let's jump into it, and we're going to pick up with finishing pool comp. So when you finish pool comp, you're done with the twin 80s. Those are the tanks you use, the open circuit scuba tanks you use. The training that you've been doing in second phase has all been exclusively with open circuit scuba gear. Those, like I said, the twin 80s, the big metal tanks in your back with air, regular air, not compressed oxygen, just mixed gas. And it's what you use for pool comp. It's what you use for everything, and you really do a lot of training on it. And you also do get beat down wearing tanks at some points too. In second phase, those are few and far between those. So, but anyways, you put that away, you're done, and you move on to the Draeger. But before I get into the Draeger, I do need to address the massive, massive shift in feel and tone of buds once you've passed pool comp. It is palpable, the difference between we haven't passed pool comp and we're in second phase, and we have passed pool comp and we're in second phase. The class feels it, and the instructors feel it. Once you pass pool comp, everything seems to change in a really, 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 really positive way. It is actually, in my mind, it's when you graduate buds. And in fact, I might even go as far as to say it's when you become a SEAL. Passing pool comp is, by every account, the last really significant test gate. You absolutely are tested on things following pool comp. I'm not making it seem like buds just becomes a joke, because it actually doesn't. It sucks after pool comp, but you stop worrying about, will I become a Navy SEAL? You don't ever tell people that, believe me, like everyone's afraid of coming off as entitled. But it's like everything changes. I mean, when you're in second phase and you haven't passed pool comp, what's on your mind is, oh my God, I hope I pass pool comp. And what would happen if I don't? Like, I can't even imagine it, But once you pass pool comp and everybody else that's passed, you kind of moved on. I remember it was like, I was never excited going to buds, like, because I actually lived out in base, I lived out in town after Hell Week. So I lived in the barracks for the first phase, and then I moved out in town after Hell Week with my wife. And I fucking hated going to work in the morning. Hated it. I mean, why wouldn't I? It was buds, right? But I remember the Tuesday, since I passed on the retest day for pool comp, the Tuesday of buds after pool comp, I was excited as hell to get to the buds compound. And everybody was. We're getting there super early to like turn in gear and do all this stuff. And we had like some class about Draeger. But it was just like amazing that we're all sitting in the second phase classroom. And it was just like everyone was happy. And no one's ever happy in buds. Like most of the time you're miserable. And everybody's miserable. And you develop, like I said, this kind of cynical sense of humor. But I remember people were really in good spirits after passing pool comp. Because again, like statistically, I don't know what the numbers are, but it's got to be in the upper 90s, upper 90% of people that successfully pass and become Navy SEALs once they pass pool comp. So I would also say, too, that your instructors do treat you differently after pool comp. They are very aware of people that act entitled. That's something that's true throughout really the training and to the team. Like, you are allowed to be happy and excited, but you're not allowed to act like now buds is going to be easy. And that's an easy way for your class to get in a lot of trouble, is if you pass pool comp and the class starts to act like buds is over, because it's not. And there's actually a lot of stuff you got to still do because you're really only halfway through the course in some ways. But assuming you don't do that, and our class was really good about it, we were, squared away. The instructors are like way cooler with you. They F with you a little bit, but everybody gets it. Like now, like the instructors are not looking at you as a, potential quitter or somebody that's not going to make it. They're looking at you like a potential teammate. And with that comes a different type of expectation. And I'm going to get into this in great detail in next part when I talk about expectations and how you interact with your instructors in third phase. And it's actually because of a big fuck up by me. I learned the hard way of what happens when you jeopardize your reputation in the eyes of your instructors. It's not good because they're viewing you as a potential teammate because you're probably going to be successful and become a SEAL, and they got to work with you. And so there's a different type of expectation that comes with that. And so in second phase, it's the first time you start to feel that your instructors are looking at you like a teammate. Not yet, but there's a level of respect you're getting, like common human decency. Like, for example, here's an example. Pre-pool comp, everybody knows that there's a very high percentage chance in some ways that people are going to get dropped from the course for not passing pool comp. I mean, there was 25 people that didn't get through pool comp in my class, the one that I finally passed in, of a class of 60 or something, people that had passed Hell Week. There's a lot of people that aren't gonna make it. A lot of them will get rolled and make it, but some won't. Plenty of guys got dropped because it was their last chance. They didn't pass pool comp. It happens. So your instructors, they don't treat you. They treat you like that could happen to you. Right, like you being the person I'm talking to here, like you guys. And so there's a little bit of mistreatment that goes with it, right? Like they don't know who's going to make it, and so they treat you like a bud student, like they kind of treat you like shit. But then once you pass pool comp, your instructors recognize that the people that are in front of them, the students that they're in charge of, they're going to remember their buds instructors. They're going to remember things that are said to them, and they're probably going to go to a team and they can bash the instructors if they act inappropriately. Not that they do, but what I'm saying is that it's like now the instructors kind of recognize that they're now being held accountable by the students a little bit more, because now the class is made up of people that are going to be trident wearers. And even though the students aren't letting on, in many cases, they're not giving away that they're totally aware of that, the power does shift a little bit, and the students now, they get treated a little bit better. So I'm kind of rambling on and on here, but it's just important to know that buds really changes after pool comp. And so you definitely notice it right away, that first day after everybody passes pool comp, that Tuesday after the retest on Monday, the atmosphere changes. And second phase post pool comp it's tiresome, but it's actually kind of awesome, because you feel that change. You feel like you've done something really major. I remember driving over the Coronado Bay Bridge back towards my apartment on Monday night after, that day I had passed pool comp, and I couldn't believe it. It was like I'm driving over the bridge, and it was the first time I was like, holy shit, I'm going to be a Navy SEAL. Like I had not allowed myself to really actually believe that until right then and there. And it was just like, holy shit, like this is real now. So it's like second phase takes on a whole different thing. It feels different. But in terms of what you actually do, right? So you show up that Tuesday following pool comp, and you got work to do. You got to learn how to use the Draeger. And so the Draeger is very, very different from the open circuit rig that you use to do pool comp with and pool league with. The biggest difference being that instead of being mixed gas like a scuba tank that you use, that you were using. And so, by the way, just so I can reference this stuff appropriately, the first part of second phase, you're using scuba tanks, right? Think of what you see on TV, scuba divers with the mouthpiece in their mouth and the tanks in their back and bubbles floating to the surface. That's a scuba tank. A Draeger is, instead of it being on your back, it's on your chest. And instead of being mixed gas that you can just pull from the atmosphere, like just literally you just suck air out of the right next to you, you have to use compressed pure oxygen, because the air is going to be in you, and then it's going to come out as CO2, and then it's going to go through this thing on your chest where it basically gets scrubbed. There's the thing called a scrubber canister that scrubs the CO2 off of, it basically turns your CO2 into O2 again, and you rebreathe it. That way, no bubbles ever leave your mouth, your nose. It allows you to be undetected underwater. Whereas if you're diving scuba, because every time you exhale, the bubbles go into the water, the bubbles go to the surface, it gives away your position, which is why we use these bubbleless rebreathers. But it's not only is it on your chest versus on your back, and not only is it pure oxygen versus mixed gas, it's totally different. It feels totally different. It's also way more dangerous. It's not like outright super dangerous, but maybe I've just got so used to diving that I just now think of it as relatively routine. It's like breathing on a paper bag. Like when you need to yawn, right? You pull in a huge breath and you yawn. But imagine if you had to yawn, but you only had a bag that you could pull in. At some point, you're going to max the bag out. You can't suck in anymore because it's vacuum sealed. It's shut down. Like that's what Draeger diving feels like. It feels like you need to yawn, and you can get 90% of the way there. You perpetually want a little bit more, but you can't have it. That's Draeger diving. And you have your mouth over the mouthpiece, and you got to like clench down, and you have like a thing that straps around the back of your head that keeps the mouthpiece really tight to your mouth, because if you let spit or water get into your tubes and it goes down into your scrubber canister, it can mix with it and create acid, and it can cause what's called a caustic cocktail, where you eventually inhale and you suck in acid. That sounds horrible. It just burns your mouth, and you also can't breathe anymore. And you need to buddy breathe with the guy next to you, or use your demand valve to override it, and you got to go to the surface. But like, imagine being in an enemy harbor. Not that I ever did that, but imagine being in an enemy harbor, and like you have a caustic cocktail. Like you can't surface. You'll get killed or captured. So you're taught all these procedures. They're just emergency procedures. So like, what happens if your rig doesn't work? And you got to do this crazy like buddy breathing. But buddy breathing with open circuit, use scuba tanks. You would just take your mouthpiece out and give it to the guy next to you, and you can breathe. But buddy breathing with a Draeger, there's a switch that every time you're going to take a mouthpiece out into the open water, because you don't want water to go into it, right? You have to turn the switch down to close the mouthpiece. And so you would hand the mouthpiece, which is pretty tight to the person who's wearing it. It's not easy to maneuver. And the guy who's buddy breathing with you would have to like stack on top of you, like lay on you on your back. And you, the person with the good rig, would have to hand it up and over your face to the guy behind you. He would have to feel it, find the switch, put it in his mouth, open it up, breathe in the air, breathe it back out. And it's a whole thing. Where I'm going with that, because that just got really technical. The Draeger is more complicated. It's more dangerous. It's more it's harder to use. It's not user friendly at all. Yeah, so dangerous, complicated, not easy to use, and really uncomfortable more than anything. And so the second half, once you finish pool comp, the second half of second phase is all about Draeger. And so I remember that week following, so that Tuesday after we passed pool comp on that Monday, we had a really lengthy familiarization with the Draeger. And actually, one of my favorite instructors, I can't give his name away because I don't know if he wants to be publicly named, but he's on Instagram. He's cool as hell. He was funny the way he was describing like how to use the Draeger. Because the first thing we did is they brought out a Draeger, and it's broken down into all these crazy, like weird little pieces. And he the way he described it is like everything he was telling us, like the catch was, well, if you screw this up, it'll just kill you. And so like this whole time he's like, well, here's your breathing bag. And if you notice a perforation here and, you're underwater at this depth, like, well, it can kill you. And here's your mouthpiece. And if this happens over here and you do it this way, well, it can kill you. And I don't think he was trying to be funny, but it ended up being like really funny because everything he was telling us had a caveat, which was just don't do this because it'll kill you. And so it was just kind of funny. By the end of the day, like everyone was just like, yeah, hey, we're gonna go have our lunch, but just be careful because if you pick up your fork wrong, it could kill you. So just anyways, it's kind of funny. But we learned how to like basically build the Draeger and then break it back down again. And that first week after pool comp is really all about like learning about the Draeger. You're in class learning about dive physics that pertain to just closed circuit diving because there's a whole other list of things you need to be aware of that do not pertain to open circuit. Like, and I'm going to get these wrong. There's different like conditions you can develop from breathing pure oxygen. Like you can develop oxygen poisoning. You can. When you surface too quickly, air can push out of your lungs, and it's called an arterial gas embolism, and it can go up into your brain and like kill you. And there's all this stuff. There's lots of stuff you got to learn. That basically there's additional medical things you need to be aware of. But the most common thing that happens with Draeger diving, that it's happened to me, it's happened to loads of people, in addition to the caustic cocktail, which does happen a lot, but not extreme. Like it happens a little bit, you get a little taste in your mouth, you're like, I got to surface. But the other thing is, what's it called? There's hypoxia and hyperpoxia. Either way, it's basically a buildup of CO2. So what you need to understand is that when you breathe on Draeger, when you're using Draeger, you become part of the Draeger in a sense, right? Like it's a closed loop. There's the machine end, the mechanical end, which is the actual Draeger that you've built, and it has its scrubber canister and it's got its pure O2 and it's like functioning fine, but you create the seal. When you put it in your mouth, then you close your mouth around the mouthpiece and you don't open your mouth again until you're done with the dive. And when you put your mask on your nose, it covers your nose and your eyes, you've now created a vacuum where whatever's in the loop is going to stay in the loop. The breathing loop is what I mean. So let's just say for a second, you take a huge haul of a cigarette, and then you put your Draeger on, you put your mouthpiece in, you put your mask on your face, and it covers your nose, and now you exhale the smoke into the Draeger. Well, that smoke and everything inside of it is not going anywhere. It's going to go through the loop, get scrubbed, and then come back into your lungs. It'll only be absorbed into your body, but it's not going to escape through your nose or your mouth. So the reason I say that is you do what's called a purge, where you basically push out all the CO2 in your body, where basically you just breathe out as much as you can through your nose, through your mouth, and then you, with all breath out of you, you basically put your Draeger on and close all the loops down, your nose, your mouth, and then you start doing this purge for a couple of minutes where you test on the surface whether or not there's any bad air in your breathing loop. And that could be that you didn't exhale all the way, and after 2 minutes, you'll actually start to feel loopy if there's anything bad in your breathing loop. But one of the things that divers need to understand is that you swim in pairs, you dive in pairs, and sometimes you may not realize you're affected by bad air in your breathing loop. So your dive buddy needs to be constantly aware of what's happening with the other. and there's all these ways you got to check, and so you have to be able to perform a rescue, and like you're constantly, when you first learn Draeger, you're constantly learning how to rescue your dive buddy, because it's silent underwater. And yes, you're tethered together, but if you're not cautious, very bad things can happen to the other, and the other, you may not even realize it. If they're able to kind of barely keep up or whatever, but there's something happening to them, they may not be lucid enough to like recognize it and stop you. And so anyways, there's all these procedures you learn. And I definitely have had bad air in the loop, even though I've done the purge and thought I was good. I jump in the water, and then after a minute, like I remember we did a pool dive with my team, and within like 30 seconds of being underwater, I like suddenly felt like elated, like really, really happy. And I was looking around the pool, and it's light in there. This is a total training dive. We're just literally like kicking the dust off, first dive after a deployment. And I'm looking around, and it was like everything was a rainbow. And it turned out I hadn't done a proper purge. I had to surface and did a new purge, and I was fine. But I guess where I'm going with all that is the first week is all about just understanding the Draeger. It's hard to build, it's hard to clean, and it's difficult to master. And I'm not going to get super tactical with it, because there's so much that goes into being good at Draeger diving. And I went through one of my qualifications at the team level is I went through what's called the Advanced Diver course, or it's called the Lead Swimmer course. And I'd be happy if you guys are interested to talk to you about what goes into that outside of the podcast. But I spent a lot of time underwater with the Draeger, and it's something that's just very difficult to master. So that first week you're learning all about it, and that Friday you do your first Draeger dive in the pool. At this point, you guys have all spent a lot of time breathing underwater, because you've done pool week, and you've even done, pool comp is you've really demonstrated that you're calm underwater. And so the familiarization dive in the pool with the Draeger is actually kind of fun. It's on a Friday, you're like second phase has been really cool post pool comp. It feels academic. It doesn't feel like a grind. You still got to do your timed runs and swims and O courses and stuff, but at that point, you're so used to doing that stuff, it's not even a big deal. And then the week kind of ends, and the pool dive you do is literally like you just get in the pool, swim around with your Draeger, and you get out. I think you do like a couple like emergency descents and emergency like you save your buddy, but it's really low key. And so the following week you do a full week of regular dives. Now this is where I don't remember fully what the order of the weeks are, but the shitty stuff that happens post pool comp in second phase is the long ocean swim. You do a 5.5 mile ocean swim, and you also do, I believe, like a training swim. Like earlier in the week, you do like a 3 mile ocean swim or something, which is just silly that you need to do that at all. But you do a 5.5 mile ocean swim, and then you also do Draeger Hell Week. And Draeger Hell Week is I would say it's up there with one of the most draining weeks I've ever had, probably just short of regular Hell Week. But draining for almost different reasons, and I'm going to get into it. But I'm not going to try to tell you when things happen, but basically you go through that first week post-pool comp, you learn about the Draeger, you do your first pool dive, and by the time the next week rolls around, you're pretty familiar with building your rig, the Draeger rig. You're familiar with kind of the procedures, and everyone's basically like competent, right? And then you get into like actual dive profiles, and they're all very simple. It's like you're gonna go out on a boat, we're gonna drop you off here, you're gonna swim to the bottom, and you and your buddy are gonna kick it out and swim back to the beach, and you're gonna follow this bearing, whatever. And just in fear of things being actually sensitive, I don't know how much I can actually give away about what goes into effective diving, because it is a skill that's definitely trained to Navy SEALs, and it's close hold. So I'm just going to kind of gloss over like how you actually go about diving, even though it's a huge component of second phase. But you do these very simple dive profiles, and then to the people who are listening who are concerned that dive physics they've heard is difficult, or like mapping out your dive with currents and tides is like difficult. They teach you everything. If you score well enough in your ASVAB to become a SEAL, you're fine, right? Like, and you're not going to get a contract unless you scored well enough to be a SEAL. So everybody's fine who goes to BUD/S. So don't worry about the academic side. If you're really concerned, I'd be happy to share with you some of the things that they teach you, but it's just unnecessary to fret about it. So you learn everything, you kind of have your baseline understanding of the Draeger, and then you go into a week of simple dive profiles. You do a couple night dives, which I would say to you that this is the first night dive I did. It was in BUD/S, and it was literally like me and my swim buddy, like literally they brought us out in a boat. We go in little like cohorts of dive pairs, and we just like would jump in, we go to the bottom, and we swim back to shore. And the first time I dove at night in actual like open bodies of water, it's not cool, man. Like the first time you do it, you hear animals, you see like the luminescence on the bottom, which is pretty cool, but it's also like kind of strange, these like weird green lights everywhere. And it is, I mean, you're not very deep. You're at like, I don't know, 15 to maybe 20 feet of seawater. But like you can't really see anything. And you're really just relying on your compass board, and like you memorize your dive profile before you get in the water. You're really relying on whoever's driving, because only one of you steers the two of you. The other one is it's called the swim buddy, and you literally just like kick it out and just hope your swim buddy knows what he's doing. The driver knows what they're doing. But the first time you dive underwater, it's really, really dark. It's very easy to get disoriented. Dolphins in San Diego will come up and check you out. SEALs too. It's a bizarre thing. I mean, unless you have an extensive amount of time spent underwater, like, if you're a recreational scuba diver or something, perhaps you would be totally comfortable. But if you're not a scuba diver, it's definitely a little bit strange doing the first couple night dives. And frankly, they're not really that enjoyable, because the Draeger, like, it's making weird sounds, which you just got to get used to, because it makes weird sounds all the time. And you get good at understanding what's a bad sound, what's a good sound. Or I should say, what's a bad sound and what's a, I don't need to worry about this sound. But, it's strange being in the water, in open water at night. And especially when all you hear is your Draeger, and sometimes the dives you do are like 4 hours long. It's disorienting. I mean, you're breathing on a bag. If you're not driving, you have no sense of where you are. I mean, you're kicking your counts and you're looking at your watch and stuff, but you don't really have a good sense of where you are. So it's just disorienting. Is what I'm saying. It's disorienting. It's uncomfortable, and you get so hungry by the end. Anyways, but I would say to you, no matter what, like the first couple times you do night diving and just Draeger diving in general, it's going to feel uncomfortable and disorienting and crappy. But pretty quickly you adjust to it and you just get used to doing it. It's not something that a lot of people like to do, Draeger diving. It's just not. It's something that we all have to do, and we get good at doing, but it's not something that people are particularly keen to do. It's just, you're like not part of the world for a little while. It's like right now, like you're listening to this, you're like above the water, and you can like speak and you can breathe normally, and you can, if it's too cold, you can adjust your temperature in your house or your car. Underwater at night with all your senses removed, on a long dive, it's hard to describe. It's like, it doesn't feel like, it feels like you're on a different planet, I guess. It's the closest thing to being in like outer space, I guess. But anyways, so that first week you do like real dives. They're all pretty simple. I would say the intensity gets ratcheted back up that week from your instructors. It's like they kind of give you that first week post pool comp, to like kind of enjoy the fact that you've accomplished an enormous milestone. And since the first thing you really got to do is academic, like learn about the Draeger, everything's pretty low key. And then that second week they start to ratchet up the intensity. They start treating you more like BUD students, less like teammates. Maybe it's scripted, I don't know. But then you get into Draeger Hell Week. And also I would say that first week after, so you do the pool comp week where you're like, cool, we finished pool comp, we have this whole week to like learn about Draeger. That's like low key. The following week, I believe, is when you not only are doing those dive profiles, you also do the 3.5, I think it is, and then the 5.5 mile ocean swim. At this point, you do 2 mile ocean swims every week. So no one's going to have any issues doing it. It just takes a really long time to complete. and the salt water like screws up your lips, and you get really hungry, and it takes such a long time. No one really fails it. It's just a check in the box. So you do that, and it's really tiring. And then the following week, I think it's the following week, that's Draeger Hell Week. So Draeger Hell Week, and really, so Draeger Hell Week, the reason they call it that is because you do 2 dives a day, every day for 5 days. And that might not seem like a whole heck of a lot, but you're doing an early morning dive, okay, which requires all the prep, and every time you use the Draeger, you break it down at the end into its component parts and clean it and hang it up to dry. You have to empty out your canister. You got to go through this long checklist of things you got to do to make sure that it's up to code, and someone has to sign it every single time. A very specific person has to sign it. It's a lot of work for even a 5-minute long dive. Is a lot of energy, but you got to do all this work like early in the morning in order to do an early morning dive. So you're doing like getting to the compound at like 3:30, and you're spending time kind of on your own. You kind of walk over to the second phase compound, and you're doing your pre-dive, and you're getting everything set up, and there's this checklist you do, and you get good at it, but it's a process, and everyone's kind of doing it at the same time. It's kind of like going through TSA, and when you're done with, you've taken off your belt and your shoes, and you've gone through the line, but then you got to like scramble to get your stuff off the belt. And you don't want to hold up the line. And even though everybody knows you have like a million things you got to grab, somehow we think that we're the only ones that have stuff on the belt. And so we're like panicking to grab everything off, and we're like running out of the way, carrying like our suitcase, and we're not even wearing our shoes anymore. And it's just a complete soup sandwich, right? Like that's how it feels inside of the dive locker where you're getting ready, because it's not a very big space and everyone's got a ton of gear, and it's all broken into little pieces. And it's a sloppy mess getting ready, and it's stressful for that reason, right? But you got to get up early, and you got to go there to prep for this dive, and then you do the dive, which is not in and of itself particularly, tiring. It's just a dive, and then afterwards you do have a post-dive process you go through, which is less intensive than the pre-dive, but still a pain in the butt. And one of the other things you got to consider too is you got to put on your rubber, like all your dive gear. On top of building just the rig, you got to put on your wetsuit, and you got to put on your kit, and you got to put on all of your fins and new chem lights. You got to reset your watch. You got to put toothpaste inside of your mask to make sure that it doesn't fog up, and you got to do all this stuff. There's like a million things you got to do, and it's just like, imagine if I like went into your room and threw everything on the ground and you had to clean it up. You could do it. It isn't like it's impossible to imagine what it would look like to clean your room up. But imagine if every day, in the morning twice and in the evening twice, your room got tornadoed and you had to clean it up to exactly the standard that I wanted you to every time, 4 times a day. It'd be really obnoxious. You'd get really good at it, you'd know how to do it, but it would be like, come on, man. So imagine you're doing that, and you have the pressure of like the TSA analogy, where you're not able to slowly put it together, your room back together. You got to do it really fast, and someone's watching you, right? That's kind of how it feels. There's lots of prep before and after the dive, and during Draeger Hell Week, you still have a normal week of buds, meaning you got to go to your O courses, you got to go to your swims, you got to go to your runs, you got to go, do whatever else you got to do, whether it's like a beat down on the grinder, or you just get beat down because whatever, you got a conditioning run. You have all this stuff that you got to do throughout the day. But because you have to do a night dive, and it has to be dark enough to do a night dive, you literally are there until the nighttime to even start the second dive, right? So imagine going to work early, doing all this prep, then doing the dive, and then doing all this post-dive, and then going and getting breakfast, and then having a normal day of awful buds. And by the way, they kind of hammer you that week because they want you to be extra tired. And then at night, when you feel like you've already done so much, you've already gotten up early and you've done a dive, you post-dived your rig, you had a whole day with various wickets you had to hit, be it your O course or swim, and then you got to do it all over again. You got to do a pre-dive. You got to go through all the procedures all over again. You got to basically go back through TSA, and it's a soup sandwich. You got all this stuff you got to do, checklists, you name it. And then you got to do the night dive, and nobody wants to do a night dive because I was just telling you, it's like breathing on a bag in pitch dark, totally like cut off from the world. I mean, at least when you're doing the morning dive, you can kind of see because light comes through and it just feels more natural. But night diving sucks. And so you got to go out and do this night dive, and always at night. Like somebody screws something up, and I'm air quoting, you can't see me. And so like you get beat down like before the dive or after, and it just feels really stressful. And then you get back and it's like 9 o'clock at night, or whatever time it is, it's late. And the dive profiles at night are typically what you did in the morning, just at night. And they're not that long or hard, maybe like 30 minutes to 45 minutes. But you get back, you're tired, you're hungry, and now you got to post dive your rig. And that takes like another half an hour to an hour. And then you got to also, once everybody's done, because you wait for everybody to be done, you have to do your normal end of day collaterals. Go clean the cars, right? I remember it's like 11 o'clock at night, and our next dive starts in a few hours, right? And in the interim, I need to go clean all the vehicles, the instructor vehicles, and go get them gassed, clean them, bring them back. Then I have to pack up all my stuff, run back over to my car, and then drive 20 minutes to my apartment, only to sleep for like 2 hours, just to turn back around and get back to the compound to do my morning dive. So it is really, really long days. And then the other factor that needs to be taken into account is when you dive Draeger, meaning when you dive pure oxygen, you get what's called Draeger ear. And it's not a big deal. It's literally like so common, but it's so uncomfortable. It's basically like air gets into like your sinuses and in your ears. And it's kind of like when you need to pop your ears, like if you go up in altitude in a plane, like you feel your ears and you like try to clear your ears, or the reverse when you go down to depth underwater. It's the same thing, but reverse, where you feel pressure. It's kind of like that, except it's more like having marshmallows like jammed in your ears, but you can't get rid of it because it's air that's trapped inside of like your ears, and you can't just clear it because it's like trapped there, and it needs to either be reabsorbed or whatever. And so you have like this weird like muffled sound in your ears that you can't get rid of, and it is reminiscent of wanting to like clear your ears. Not as much pressure as you would feel if you're going up in altitude or going to depth. It isn't like painful pressure, but it's pressure that you can't get rid of. It's literally hard to hear, and it's from Draeger diving. So in addition to being really, really tired and just like working constantly, you have this weird thing going on with your ears. And I would also say too that diving and just diving on pure oxygen in general is just a very exhausting activity. I mean, you're constantly kicking. You don't think about it because you don't realize you're sweating, but you're kicking it out the whole time. I mean, you're constantly flutter kicking for up to like 2 to 4 hours. And then over the course of those 5 days, where you're literally sleeping for a couple hours at night, if you're living in town, I guess if you're living on the barracks or at the barracks, you might get another hour of sleep or something. But you're not really sleeping full nights. I mean, at best, maybe you're getting 5 hours if you're in the barracks, but probably it's closer to like 3 hours of sleep. And the week before, you did the 5-mile ocean swim, and like you're a little bit beat coming into the week, and the dives get longer. So over the course of the week, the first day you do relatively rudimentary dives. You're doing like boxing. There's all these dives you do that are pretty simple, but they get longer and more complicated to the point where at the end of the last dive, you're doing a contour dive, like all around this kind of like golf course. And it takes I ran out of air. I mean, the last dive I did during Draeger Hell Week, me and my I had to surface. We were luckily at the ramp to be done with the dive, but like I was literally out of air. And unlike what you might imagine where all of a sudden it's like clunk, that doesn't happen with Draeger because it's a closed loop and you're breathing out and then back in. You're just expecting it to be oxygen. But if the O2 is not into the bag, you could be basically breathing your own CO2 because there's no fresh O2 being pumped into it from time to time. That's the other part of the system. It's not like you just literally breathe into this thing and it just magically becomes O2. You have a feeder system of pure oxygen that from time to time you can add back into the loop because your body's going to absorb some of that oxygen every time you breathe it. So you got to replenish what you absorb, or what your body absorbs. So I ran out of air on this dive because it was like 4 hours. It was like an exhaustion dive. So Draeger Hell Week is like this really, really, really tiring and just kind of tedious thing. I remember we were like on the bus driving over to the dive site with all our gear on, which is like so uncomfortable too. I haven't even hit on that. Like anytime, anyone who's scuba dived, you know that when you have all your gear on the surface, it sucks. It sucks because it's not designed to be worn on the surface. It's designed to be underwater. And even though your tanks feel like they weigh 1,000,000 pounds, they're neutral underwater, and everything's on you for a reason, whether it's your weight belt or your fins. But it works underwater. It sucks on land. And in buds, they really maximize the uncomfortability of wearing your full like ensemble, your dive ensemble, on land. Like it was commonplace to like have some reason that we needed to like be fully jocked up, but like, oh, we got to go over here and listen to this brief that we easily could have done before we jocked up. But like clearly it's buds, they're going to make us jock up, and then we're going to sit there with this thing digging into our neck because it sits around your neck like a necklace, but it's like 30 pounds, and that's it. It's just pulling your neck down. Or like you get beat down with like your rubber on. It's a miserable thing. So Draeger Hell Week. I remember. So anyways, I was driving in the bus heading over. We were all jocked up, and I remember it just felt like an unbelievable distance. It was like a Wednesday, and the thing is done Friday. It's like just 2 more days. I remember like I longed for the end of Draeger Hell Week way more than I longed for the end of actual Hell Week. That doesn't mean it was harder. It just means that I was just ready for that shit to be done. Like Hell Week, it's such a big like real Hell Week in first phase. It's such a big milestone, and everybody knows it is, that there's an element of like, oh my god, I'm doing it. This is so cool. Draeger Hell Week, dude, you passed pool comp. This is like the entitlement factor. You're like, dude, I'm going to be a Navy SEAL. I don't need to go through 5 days of 2 dives a day to prove I know how to use this thing. Especially when, to be honest, the dives we were doing were not particularly complicated. If you could do one, you could do them all. But it's buds, right? Like, that's the other thing. This is what I should have said earlier in the episode, is if I were to offer a piece of advice for the folks on here that I'm sure some of you will be post-pool comp. I mean, like, just the odds are totally in your guys' favor that a bunch of you will be successful. When you are post-pool comp, like, just tell yourself, this is still buds. Not because you need to be kept humble, but like literally to remind yourself, even though you may have passed an enormous wicket, there's still a lot of time left that you have to go through buds, and it doesn't actually get easier. It's just much more likely you're going to succeed. And so when you start feeling frustrated that like your instructors are being overly dickish to you, or like, why in the world are we doing Draeger Hell Week? What the hell is the point of this? Think about it. The point is they want this to be hard. It might not be a test cape, but like they're trying to continue to test you throughout the rest of the course. They're not just going to show you how to use the Draeger. That's not like how Navy SEALs operate. In order to be good at Draeger, if you're a Navy SEAL, you need to know if you can operate when you're exhausted and mad. You need to be sure that you can not be complacent when you're doing multiple iterations of dives that seem so mundane and easy. Like, they want to see if you're capable of, when you're in a bad mind state, can you still be successful at this? And so it makes a lot of sense when you're done with buds. But when you're in buds, you're like, fuck this. Why are we doing Draeger Hell Week? So I wish that, so when you're in this position, just remember, like, be really happy that you passed a major milestone, but also at the same time understand that buds is going to still suck for the rest of the time, but you can start planning for wearing a trident on your chest. That's basically the only difference. And it's a great feeling, but it quickly gets replaced with, dude, fuck buds. So just keep that in mind. So Draeger Hell Week, it finally comes to an end. And I remember I came home on Friday night and I slept, obviously. I got to my apartment in Mission Valley with my wife, and I literally just like walked in and just passed out. And in the morning I got up at like 10 on Saturday, and I went into the kitchen, and I think I got a quick bite to eat, and then had 100% expectation of being awake and spending some time with my wife, and just like enjoying the fact that Draeger Hell Week was done. And I think we only had maybe one more week of second phase where we did like the FTX, which is the final training exercise. And it's just like one kind of major dive. And then we go into third phase. And so it was kind of exciting. I went back in my room after grabbing a bite to eat. I went back in my room to get like clothes on or whatever, or like change or something. And I like laid down for a millisecond, just laid down for a second. And I slept all that day, so all of Saturday. And I slept all the way until Sunday afternoon. I just like laid in bed and slept for almost like 20 hours. I just like was totally ruined from Draeger Hell Week. And I'm probably exaggerating. My memory is probably wrong, but it was like I fell asleep in the afternoon on Saturday, not even the afternoon, like early afternoon, and slept all the way into like the afternoon or like the very late morning of Sunday, like unintentionally. I was so tired from Draeger Hell Week. So anyways, a couple things from this point forward. One of the things that I should have mentioned that really is important, it's not even important, it's just cool, is like as you pass the major milestones in buds, there are things that you literally get. You get issued when you pass certain milestones. And in fact, I did an Instagram video, I'm pretty confident, on the different milestones. And so the way it works is when you get to buds, and by the way, these are totally status symbols. They're not designed to be that, but you only get issued these things if you pass certain test gates, and everybody in buds knows what the different test gates are. Like, you go to buds and you're what's known as a white shirt. You literally wear a white shirt under your camis with your name stenciled on it to signify that you have not passed Hell Week yet. When you pass Hell Week, they literally give you a brown shirt. And you can actually go out and buy brown t-shirts, and it feels really special. And everybody knows that brown shirts are guys that have passed Hell Week. It's a big deal, right? So it is a way that the instructors know who's who, but it's also totally to represent, like, you've earned this. You've earned the right to wear a brown shirt, and it's a really big deal. You're extremely proud. First time you stencil that brown shirt, you're going to be like, this is the most important thing I own. And so next is you go to second phase, and you get, you get a green helmet. Obviously in first phase you get a green helmet and you get your white shirt, and then you pass Hell Week, you keep your green helmet because you're still in first phase, but you get your brown shirt, and you wear a brown shirt for the rest of the time and through SQT. Second phase, everyone basically keeps their green helmet, and then you get issued a blue helmet, which signifies second phase. But you are pre-pool comp, so you don't have a dive watch yet. So if I was to be at the Buds compound right now, and I'm sure it's changed, but at least when I was there, if someone's wearing a brown shirt and a blue helmet and they don't have a watch on their wrist, it means they're in second phase, but they haven't passed pool comp yet. Once you pass pool comp, because you're going to be moving into Draeger diving, and you need to have a watch, whereas before you're just doing pool diving and testing with the scuba tanks, you don't need a watch, and so you don't get a watch. But you get a watch once you pass pool comp. And so when you see students in buds that have a blue helmet, everyone has a brown shirt if they're wearing a blue helmet, and if they have a watch on, because you all have to wear it. These are not optional items, you wear it everywhere, right? It signifies they've passed pool comp. And so I remember when I got issued my watch, I had a G-Shock watch. It was like having a Ferrari or something. Like, I don't know what the comparison is in civilian life. But you want to talk about being the most fucking badass in the world in buds, because there's a whole thing where, as a bud student, the SEALs are looked at as instructors, and so they're kind of different, right? They're not our peers. Those are instructors. Those are different. They're a different ecosystem. In the student ecosystem, what I should say is students are far more impressive than SEALs are when you're a student, like times infinity. Okay. Like, when you're in buds and you see someone in Hell Week, that dude is a rock star. You know, when you see someone who's past Hell Week, a brown shirt, you feel like you're like talking to a celebrity. When you see someone in a blue helmet, you're like, holy shit, this dude's like, he's halfway through buds. When you see someone in a blue helmet with a dive watch on, that's a SEAL. That guy is going to be a Navy SEAL. And your desire to like be in his shoes is profound. So just throwing that out there. That's it's a funny thing. When you pass pool comp, everyone was so excited to put that G-Shock watch on. I don't know if that's the same thing now. I don't know if you get a G-Shock or if you can get a dive watch, but that was a really big deal when I was there. So anyways, kind of segued there, but so you wrap up your Draeger Hell Week, and then the following week you do the FTX, which is just you do a full dive profile, you plan it out. As I recall, it was just kind of low-key, and we do this dive. And then you transition over to third phase. Okay, so third phase, I'm going to talk at length about third phase. Really, next episode, it'll be the final part of this thing. What I'll get into, though, is you need to understand when you go into third phase that third phase fucking sucks. It sucks. And yes, that is my opinion, and I'm sure there are people that would say, oh, dude, third phase was great. We got to shoot and blow stuff up, and it was so cool. I'm sure there are people that say that, right? So take it with a grain of salt. But third phase is like first phase in terms of the physicality of it, but nobody quits. No one's gonna quit. You're just like resigned to the fact that at this point, the blood and sweat equity that you have put into this course to this point is so high. I mean, you've passed all the test gates. All you got to do is go to third phase, go learn how to do some land navigation, learn how to shoot a gun, not even well, just a little bit. Learn how to blow some stuff up, and that's a stretch. It is so scripted when you're doing explosives in third phase, for good reason. I mean, you're handling explosives for the first time, but it's like nothing is all that difficult. It's all pretty easy to learn. But it's the last part of buds. And for whatever reason, the last part of buds, they've just decided is just going to be basically a huge kick in the face to round it out. But you know what? That's okay, because by the time you're done with buds, you really have earned the right to say you graduated buds. But the way third phase works, I'll give you the kind of rundown, is it's really broken up into two parts. You have the first part, which is, call it local, where it's really not all local. You do some training in San Diego at the Buds compound. And then you do some training at a place called Laguna. Laguna? Is that what it's called? Yeah, Laguna. There's a mountain range where there's like all these trails and stuff, and you go do some land navigation out at Laguna. And then when you get back from that, you go for the second half of training, which is you fly to an island called San Clemente Island, and you stay there there's a whole compound there that's the Buds compound, but it's the third phase Buds compound, that the only people who get to see it are Bud students that have made it that far and SEAL and staff. So it's a pretty exclusive place. And it's cool. Like I remember I got out there and I saw, I think it was like in the bathroom, I want to say it was Marcus Luttrell. It might have been Morgan Luttrell, but it was definitely a Luttrell name written on one of the walls, like his Buds class or something. And remember, like when I came in, I read Lone Survivor and I was all about that. I was like totally obsessed, with everything SEAL. And it was just really cool to be out in third phase and see that. So anyways, but I'm getting derailed. We will cover the island. So the last part of training in the next episode, we'll probably have to cover quite a bit of third phase because I'm not going to be able to get to everything on this part of this episode. But next one will be the island for sure. But so for this episode, as we kind of round it down, third phase, the first part of it, you go from feeling like you accomplished a lot in second phase. I mean, even more than first phase, where first phase it feels like not technical. It just feels like it's a gut check. You need to demonstrate that you're tough really more than anything. Second phase, it introduces a level of technicality that first phase can't even touch. I mean, getting through pool week and then Draeger, which Draeger, it's not really like getting through it, but you're learning a skill set. Granted, I've said this before that Buds is all about selection. They're not really training you to do anything. That's not entirely true. Second phase, you do learn basics of diving, and that does feel like you're being taught something. And you feel like you've learned something. And so you've finished second phase. You get your red helmet, which is so cool. I remember being like, that is just the coolest thing. To see my name on the back of a red helmet was just like, oh man, it still like gives me goosebumps even thinking about it. And you also get issued your kit. So you get H gear that you really don't even use very much. But you get issued some H gear, which is the last of the status symbols you get in Buds. You're also issued what's called a shape, which is it's the same weight and looks just like an actual M4, but it's rubber. It's so that you can run around carrying your gun at high port and doing all sorts of dumb stuff like that. But anyways, you only spend 4 weeks in third phase in Coronado. The rest of the time is out at... Actually, I'm sorry, you only spend 3 weeks in San Diego Coronado, I mean, in third phase. The rest of the time you're at Laguna, or you're out at the island. But those first 3 weeks, you get to those you get to third phase, you get your helmet, you get your H gear and all that, and you meet the third phase staff. And obviously it's different. And honestly, I actually know a lot of the guys that are instructors right now, and it's so funny to think that my generation is not only at the stage where they are instructors, it's that they're at the stage where they're like senior in the teams. They're beginning to become senior, which is actually pretty interesting. Like there are people that are in my peer group that are more senior than some of my buds instructors were, which is just interesting to be at that point. But the attitude of third phase instructors, at least when I was there, was very gatekeepery. What I mean by that is they were they understood that they were the last chance to take a pound of flesh from you. Like, this is it. This is the end. And if there's any turds in the class, and if you haven't heard that terminology, turd is the universal, it is a word that is used in the teams that means something fairly specific. It means a guy that nobody wants to work with, that should be off the team, that fucking sucks, that I don't give a shit that he made it through buds, he's a fucking turd, he shouldn't be here. Because people do get through the training that, shouldn't be there in the eyes of the community. And they're labeled a turd. And some turds even get kicked out of the teams. And that's a whole separate discussion. But the idea in my mind, the way I understand it, of third phase is now that you've all passed the test gates, we're going to fuck you up to make sure this group understands the world they're entering into, and they understand the weight and responsibility of what you're about to go do. That's the way I kind of made sense of how you're treated in third phase, because the instructors know you are not going to quit. Funny story, I did have someone quit in my third phase, and I'll get to that. But besides that true anomaly, nobody quits. Nobody quits. It's like you just go do it. But those first 3 weeks, really all you do is you get beat down a lot, like first phase level beat downs, but without boats and logs, and everyone's like, what the fuck is going on? Why are they treating us so horribly? The standards that you have to hit are the highest. Well, they're not the highest they will be, because the last few weeks of the island, you have to hit the fastest run times and swim times and everything. But they get pretty hard in third phase, although you're in really you don't feel like it, but you're in amazing shape. But you got to do like O courses at like some really fast clip. But at this point, you've like perfected the O courses. You do it all the time. Your ocean swims are quick. I remember I really needed to really put out in order to make the time, but I wasn't a great swimmer. Also, fun fact about ocean swims, when you finish it, you have to do what's called a bottom sample, where you swam all the way down to the buoy and all the way back. You do your 2 miles, and the instructors are on jet skis waiting for you to check in when you're done. And you say your name, like, instructor, blah, 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 Alan, like, this time, booyah. And they're like, all right, get a bottom sample. And you and your swim buddy have to swim down to the bottom of the ocean, which is like, sometimes if it's high tide, like 20 plus feet. And you've just swam as fast as you possibly could to get the time. And the instructor's waiting for you to go to the bottom and come back up with sand on your head. And you cannot not do it, because they will not let you go into shore without it. But you're gassed from doing the swim. And I remember swimming down to get that fucking bottom sample sometimes was agony for me, because I was so bad at going down to get. Other guys had no problems probably. But there were times where like, I was like, fuck, I'm going to like pass out down here. But anyways, you had to get the sand, you had to put it on your head and then swim up to the surface. If they saw sand on your head, that meant you were good to go to the beach. Anyways, that was just a dumb part of training. But those first 3 weeks, you just do hard runs and swims and O courses, and you also start learning land navigation. You don't start applying it, you start learning it. Land navigation is as simple as it sounds. Simple to understand as it sounds. Like, without a GPS, can you navigate this terrain to certain parts of it? Can you use a map and a compass, and can you navigate? It's very fundamental to being in the military, not even being in the SEAL teams. You got to know how to navigate. It's a really important skill. And so they teach you this stuff. You learn how to use a map and a compass. But it's just like I did not like those first 3 weeks. if you're picking that up. It just felt like second phase by the end, you got into a rhythm. You felt like you were being treated with a level of respect that you feel like you had earned. You felt like you were learning, and then third phase happens, and it's almost like you're back to being in first phase, and no one gives a fuck that you passed pool comp. It's like, no, you're going to get to third phase now. Maybe that was just the particular staff I had, but I think that's part of the course, that they want it to end on like this is still very serious, and you better remember what the fuck you're doing. It's also, like I said, it's the last chance to weed people out if there are people that are not good for the teams. And that's another discussion that's hard to get into without really diving into it, so I'm not going to. So anyways, you do those first few weeks, and then you go out to Laguna to actually put into practice land navigation. So of all the stuff I did in I guess in third phase, probably in buds, with the exception of that first week when I had passed pool comp where I was so happy to go to work, the only other time that I enjoyed being at buds, and I'm probably totally not accurate on this, but was during Laguna. Laguna, you go out for the day and you follow these like long land navigation courses, and you're on your own. You get to pack like snacks, and you get to have a backpack, and you're in this beautiful part of California, and you just have the whole day to be completely on your own. You just got to check in with your stupid big radio. You got to like do a sat check every hour to check in, and there's procedures you got to follow, but you're really like you're left alone. You just need to go and find these points on the map, and every time you get there, there's something that's like hidden. There's a little tag that's like tied to a tree that's hard to find. And when you get to it, you write down the number that's on it or something. But there's a definite like accounting system to make sure you've really gone to the points you're supposed to go to. And, people sometimes miss a point and they skip it and go to another one. But you need to like acquire a certain number of points out of the total. And then you need to get to extract by the end of the day. And it's a whole day. And you're there for like, I want to say a week at Laguna. My Laguna experience, it was great during the day, awful at night. We were there in the winter, and it actually snowed while we were there, and you stay in these tents, these big Alaska tents, and we just got the crap beat out of us at night, by the instructors, which I think is par for the course. It's like, oh, you guys don't want to make your sat checks every hour. Roger that. All right, we're going to fuck you guys up tonight. You know what I mean? Like, nobody knows if we've actually done anything to like draw the attention or the negative attention of our cadre, but like every night it was like just a beat down, and it was just like people are just miserable at night. But the daytime, even though it was a lot, I mean, dude, you're walking around with a lot of water and weight. It's a lot of work, but you're left alone, and it really is beautiful. And I loved Laguna. I look back very fondly at Laguna. And then we actually had Christmas break where we went out to Laguna one time to try to do it, and it snowed so much that they actually postponed it. We had to like go back, and then we had Christmas break like right there. So we went home for a week. So if you're in buds, you do get a break for Christmas. I forget how many days it is. I think it's like literally a week, and it's bizarre because you've been doing buds around the clock for a long time, and then you like, oh yeah, take a break. It's weird. It's awesome, but it's weird. And so I went back after Christmas to do the latter half. And, I will just say that I think that it would not be fair if I didn't put this out here. My experience in third phase was really, really negative because I had a very, very difficult island. Not because the island was harder, or our class went through something that was harder or something. It's that I fucked up, and it made my experience on the island really, really, really hard. So I'm not trying to just be like, I'm not trying to hide what happened. I've written about it, so I'm not going to get into it because I want to make sure that I give it its full time. But what happens is we go to the island for these final 4 weeks, and in the early part of the island, you're exposed to tear gas, and it's, this is going to sound like an excuse, but it's like, and it's the military grade stuff. It's at close quarters. You're outside, so you're not in an enclosed space, but you're exposed to it for a longer amount of time than normal. And the only rule is the whole class is going to take a knee and basically take the tear gas, and you're not supposed to run, right? Like you're supposed to take the tear gas. And I bolted. I ran away. It was so horrible. Within like 2 seconds of it being lit off, I ran. And so there was a lot of fallout from that. And I mentioned much earlier that your reputation is really important in the eyes of your instructors once you pass the pool comp. The same way your instructors, care about their reputation in the eyes of you. I guess that's not necessarily true of the third phase staff, because they didn't give a fuck about us. But the issue with the CS gas when I ran from it was I'm being viewed not only by the staff, but my own classmates as a teammate, like we will be on a SEAL team together. We will go into war together. And instead, if it had been like early first phase, I did something like that, it could have just been like dismissed because no one really knows what they're made of yet. But by the time you're at the end of you're towards the end of third phase, there's no more test gates. There's no more really wickets. Like, we're going to go on to become SEALs. And now people are looking at me as, holy shit, like this guy, if he ran from the CS gas, like, is he really cut out to be a SEAL? It was, so I don't want to give away how much, what went into that, because I think I'm going to do a good job conveying the whole experience the next time. But the reason I'm bringing that up is my overall experience with third phase was very, very negative. I was, I struggled pretty mightily in buds. I was definitely not a guy that like got into buds and did great. I got rolled twice, and had it not been for the goodwill of my first phase proctor, I would have been dropped, because I would have had 2 performance rolls, and that would have been that. And then by today's standards, I think it's like you get 3 attempts for pool comp before you get rolled. And I passed on my 7th total attempt, because we were given 4 per class. So I know that, I guess what I'm saying is I got to third phase, and I felt like I had just gotten by on the skin of my teeth a little bit, but I felt in the same breath, I felt like I'd really earned everything I had. I felt like very proud of the fact that I was still there, because I shouldn't have been in some ways. And I was liked by my class. I really think I had a very good reputation. I mean, who knows, right? Like, people could have hated me, but I felt like overall I had a great reputation. And then, screwing up in third phase with the CS gas, which again I'll get into next time more in detail, it really was hard for me to handle. And I think that ultimately that experience made me a much better person, and certainly a better operator. And it also taught me a lot about what real adversity feels like. And that's what I'm going to get into the next episode. So I feel like I kind of short-stroked third phase a little bit. So probably what makes sense is to cap off this series next time. I will do a little bit of a recap that will go a little bit long on third phase up to the island. I can cover a little bit more on land nav, but I'll give a little bit more detail, a little more color, and then we'll really get into the island, because the island is a trying experience. It is in particular for me, it was like I was so fucking mad at the end of third phase that like, yeah, it was really hard. But we'll get into it next time. So that wraps it up. I hope that this one was as thorough as it could have been. Certainly, if you guys have any questions about anything I've covered, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to give you any additional color. While our Flash tier is no longer active, our Flash tier is done. If you were lucky enough to go grab one of those $14 tiers, enjoy your $14 price point every month until the end of the year. If you're on the $5 tier, remember that at the end of this month, September, you're going to need to either accept that your full access right now is going to be reduced to the basic package, which you can look online on the Patreon page. Go to the $5 basic package. That's what you're going to have come October 1. Or you can upgrade to the 15 or the 20, and you can just read the perks online. If you have any questions about how to upgrade or reasons to upgrade or suggestions on pricing or what we can do better or what's going well, I'd love to hear it. We're not trying to just build this thing just to get you guys to pay money and move on. We're really trying to build a thriving ecosystem of mentors and mentees. And we want you all to feel like you didn't just pay money to just be seeing random content and having a random the Discord channel is great, but that you effectively had access to people that were willing to put time aside to chat with you, and make sure that you felt like someone was taking a vested interest in your success. Because I really want every one of you to be super successful. And frankly, coming from a very humble background myself, with nothing really significant on my resume, I assure you that it just takes a mindset and commitment up front to be successful at Buds. It doesn't take a physique. It doesn't take, being a legacy person who knows 50 Navy SEALs. It just takes a mindset, and I think that comes with being armed with information and understanding, and also just being humble. So anyways, please feel free to reach out to me. This concludes the episode here. I will talk to you guys soon. All right. Bye-bye.